I'm Will Norton from the Meek School, and it's my privilege to welcome you all to the first session of today's programs. First thing I want to tell you is hashtag is Innovate215. Tic-tac-toe sign, Innovate215, and there's a prize. 2015. I'm sorry, 2015. I knew I'd mess it up. There is a prize for the best tweet, and we want you to really tweet Louis Dvorkin.
I hope not.
Tweet him well. Louis, I first met when he was a sophomore at the University of Iowa, and I was publisher at a school paper. He became the editor. He was an editor who did investigative reporting all over the city. The city council members would come into the newsroom to talk to him because of the kinds of reports that our newspaper was doing. It was a paper that was huge. It would have two sections, and it was full of ads and it was full of news, and it was because of Louis's expertise at finding students all over the campus who were specialists in areas and really good journalists. And over time, after he graduated, he went to AP Dow Jones in New York City and was in the business community doing reporting, went to the New York Times, Newsweek, was at AOL for a considerable amount of time, started his own company, sold that company to Forbes, and now he's Chief Products Officer for Forbes Media. Please welcome Louis Dvorkin.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Will Dean was my initial first mentor, and that goes back 40 plus years. And as I tell colleagues in my business, I'm not sure I would have been in this business if it were not for Will. So thank you. And thank you for the invite here. It's great. I don't do a lot of this, but when I do it, I enjoy it. And I know I'd like to make this interactive, so I'm not crazy about the tweeting, so I've learned in life, do not say what you don't want in public. So but I can go crazy, so I'll take the lumps that I get. Before I start, I have a presentation here, which I hopefully be fun, but I generally like to understand my audience, which is what the journalism is all about right now, is connecting one-on-one with an audience. So let me understand this audience a little bit. How many people here have ever seen the movie Network? Okay. How many people have seen the movie Broadcast News? Pretty good. And how many people have watched The Newsroom on HBO? All right, more of that. Okay. So there are Howard Beals that exist today. There are Faye Dunaways that exist today. There are Albert Brooks that exist today. There are anchors that exist today. And those movies in some ways were very romantic notions of the media business. Some a bit hardcore, but there was a romance involved. But that title up there of Models in Mayhem, there's not that same kind of romance anymore. Now, I grew up just like you guys, probably, with a lot of romance. And I grew up in the times when journalism was changing dramatically. And that was 1970 to 74, and we'll get into that here. So today, it's a very different world that you're entering, very different, but just as exciting, and it requires a very, very open mind to what's happening in the media business today. So let's start here. How many people here participated in that little thing that happened a few weeks ago? Was the dress blue or white? Do we remember that? Yes. Okay. Well, let me tell you something. I remember it well, and I call that the great media meltdown of early 2015. And the reason why you know how many page views BuzzFeed got on that story? Anybody have a guess? 5, 10, 15, 50? 38 million page views. 38 million page views on that. And 550,000 comments, or as BuzzFeed calls them, notes. Here was my favorite tweet. I'm going to read it. Vox reporting on a piece in which Vice found an expert to comment on a BuzzFeed piece about a Tumblr post. That is the world that we live in today, okay? Now, it wasn't just Vox. I know the CEO or Vice. I know all these guys. It wasn't just them. It was the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Atlantic and USA Today, and I cringed when I saw even Forbes. There was a contributor who did that as well. And I'm going to tell you why that's going on, okay? That's going on because there is a mad rush for viral traffic. And there's a mad rush for traffic because you get page views. People view page views. And guess what's on a page? Ads. People we need to serve advertising inventory. So 10 years ago, it was called Google. And everybody figured out how to get more search results in Google. Well, now it's all about, in some cases, pandering to a social media audience, which includes everybody in this room. And there is a lot of that goes on, and we do it. Everybody does it. It's just the way it is, and we try to bring some kind of order to the whole thing. Which brings me to what I call the great, if there was a great meltdown, there's a great challenge. Who are you? What is a media company today? Who should you be? What you should be? That guy there is B.C. Forbes. He is the founder of Forbes magazine from 97 years ago. I really believe the key to any successful media company moving forward is to have a unique identity. A unique identity that works for your audience, a very sophisticated audience of which you're part of, but a unique business that also works as a business. This is a business, and you need to have an identity that works for both your audience and a business. So we're sticking with B.C. Forbes because he had a vision that Forbes was about something. We are about something. We are about entrepreneurial capitalism. A lot of what many of you in the room as journalists will experience. You will be becoming entrepreneurial journalists, not just people who work and get paid a salary. So we're sticking with that vision. It's who we are. It's what we want to be. But we also recognize that we need to do something where we're making a meaningful difference. You need to make a meaningful difference in the world today. Better sameness is not going to do the trick. You need to have meaningful difference from what you do, who your competitor is. Now, stories and scoops, they're very, very important. But that's not going to solve the problem for the media business today. We need great stories, we need investigative work, but we need new models, which was part of the slide up here. Models. How do you create content? How do you pay for that content? What's the right labor model or the right newsroom model? What is the right advertising model? So that's what I mean when I talk about meaningful difference. We need new models in the world of journalism if we're going to make a meaningful difference. Now here's another old guy. You know who he is? That's Peter Drucker, very famous guy. I want to read this quote. The mission says why you do what you do, not the means by which You do it. Okay? Now, for 100 years, journalism has pretty much done things in the exact same way. We have processes, we have systems, we have newsrooms, and a lot of journalists have built their persona around the processes and the systems. And oh, by the way, the big edifices that they live in or they work in. That's their identity. So what we've done is we've realized we needed to keep the mission, but change the way we do it. And change the way we do it in the world in which we live. So it's our philosophy that there's a content continuum. There's user-generated content, and there's journalistic content. Consider those bookends. And everywhere in between, there's a lot of stuff. There's marketing content, there's expert content, there's a lot of content. So we call that the content continuum. So we've tried to understand that and bring that into our model, which we'll talk about. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit too. Now, these guys you might know Snapchat. They have changed the culture of photo sharing online. They were on the cover of Forbes because we are about entrepreneurial capitalism. But we're also, like they changed the culture, we are also changing the culture of publishing. By changing our models, we are changing the culture of publishing. Now, I want everybody, who is this guy? Don't the oldsters answer. Who is that guy? Come on, come on. That is Carl Bernstein. That guy brought down a crooked president with his partner, Bob Woodward. That's the era I grew up in. That's why I got into this business. And I still have, I don't have an office anymore. I work in an open office. But I have what's called an original one sheet, which is a movie poster that I paid a lot of money for, that sits in my space of that movie, All the President's Men. And I remember that because that's why I got into it, okay? Now, let me be clear. There is nothing better in the world than great reporting, great storytelling, great investigation. I can remember back then the New York Times and the Washington Post duking it out. It was an incredible moment to get into this business. But journalists don't own journalism. There was journalism before journalists. Matter of fact, Will probably knows the first time there was a professional journalism school. It came after journalism started. So they don't own it. We got a lot of smart people out there. A lot of smart people, authors, academics, and whatnot. So what we did, speaking of, there are a lot of journalists out there, or non-journalists out there. Anybody remember the Dan Rather episode with Bushgate? How many remember that? Okay. Dan Rather and CBS were brought down by a non-journalistic community. Always remember, there's always someone out there who knows more than you do as a journalist. Always, okay? There were guys, people, that was an episode during 2 months before the presidential election where they went out and did some investigative work about George Bush's presence in the National Guard and the military service based on some questionable documents. There was somebody out there who understood typography. There was someone who understood type, and they called him on it, and they brought down an entire network, basically. Not a journalist, but an expert. So, your greatest competitors out there are not the people who you're going to graduate with, but people who know more than you do. So here's what we did. Watch the slide. We took the halo off the journalist, okay? We took it off. As much as I respect journalists, we took it off. And we said that there are a lot of people out there that are really smart. They may not have gone through journalism training, but they're experts and they're knowledgeable. and they're knowledgeable about different subjects. These are all contributors. So how we do it is we have staff writers, definitely. Probably have about 40 staff writers who report and edit and investigate. But here's the truth. That's down from probably 100 6 years ago. Okay? But our 40 staff writers are great. All those people up there, we have 1,500 of those. And they're all knowledgeable about specific topic areas. I got a question, I don't see his face here, but I got a question yesterday about one of our contributors and about how much they make. And I answered the question by saying, there's an individual, he attracts 1 million people a month to his content. He did that for 12 consecutive months. And as a freelancer, he made $100,000. Now, here's what he did before doing that for us. He was a forklift operator. He was a forklift operator who knew the video gaming business better than reporters know the video gaming business. And he could write. And he built an audience. There are a lot of forklift operators out there who really know something. There are doctors in here. There are lawyers in here. There are authors in here. There are academics in here who understand the business they're in. I'll give you another example. We have one great medical reporter on our staff and 75 medical contributors. That's a scalable model. We can't afford to pay 75 people covering the world of medicine, but we can afford one great one and 75 contributors who understand that business. And they're all paid, and they're all paid by the size of their audience. And you can have a big audience one month, and you start the next month all over again at zero. It's not like being a staffer where you're guaranteed a check. These contributors, if they attract 100,000 one month and zero the next, they'll make money one month and zero the next. That's called entrepreneurial journalism. And that is something we started 4 or 5 years ago and is spreading in many companies throughout the media business in New York. How about that? You guys watch that show? Okay? Guess what? They're not stupid. They're smart. Marketers are smart. Okay? Marketers have knowledge. They have knowledge about their industries. Yes, they have an agenda. But dare I say, in many ways, so do reporters and journalists have agendas. And I think that's the thing to realize here, is that when you think about it, I like to say, if I say what journalism is, the mission of journalism is to inform. And when you inform, you collect information, you observe, and you interpret. And when you do all that, you bring biases. Some of those biases are conscious, some of them are not. So we all have them, and they have them too. But they understand their industries. They are part of the content continuum. And we understood that at Forbes 4 or 5 years ago, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But when we started to understand that, and we permitted marketers to publish on Forbes, it was viewed as the end of journalism. So, we gave those guys tools to publish, and we gave those guys tools to publish. We pay them, they pay us, okay? It's a good model. And they pay us a lot. They pay us a lot to be part of a credible news environment. That's today. Back then it was called ruining journalism. Today it's called native advertising. And matter of fact, the company that I started that and started that. And we were doing it along with BuzzFeed 6 or 7 years ago. So we didn't turn out to ruin journalism. I just actually read a piece in a publication called Digiday this morning. Guess what? The New York Times is doing native advertising. The Wall Street Journal is doing native advertising. Quartz is doing native advertising. It's called a new kind of advertising model. Not better sameness, but meaningful difference. It's a very complicated term, but the point is it is enabling marketers to connect to an audience in a new way. It's a new model. What do we also have to do? You have to recognize technology drives the journalism business, whether it's the printing press, or whether it's satellite TV, or whether it's truck, or whether it's a satellite. Everything, journalism changes as the technology business changes. And one of the things that we had to do is recognize that, and we needed to build the publishing tools so they could publish and so they could publish. So we had to build a whole apparatus of what's called distributed technology. We made tools that thousands of people could use around the world at their will all the time. That's changing 100 years of publishing systems. No more is it a system where editor, 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 editor. It's not economically affordable. We gave people the tools to publish. And they publish under our umbrella, and we choose the people to publish, and we trust them, and if they break that trust, we take the steps that we need to take. Distributed workforce of people, distributed tools for basically what's a distributed audience of however many are on the web these days, 150 million, I've lost track of. Actually, it's way more than that, obviously. It's billions. So that's one of the things that we had to do. We changed the models. I keep going back to that. We changed the content creation model. We changed an advertising model. We changed a labor model. We changed technology model. That guy, I'm sure a lot of people don't know that guy. That's during the space race. I forget his name now. Fred probably remembers. But data. Data is critical to everything we do right now. Gut is great. Gut with data is better. So we built a system where data flows through a newsroom, and everybody's doing that right now. It's very hard to understand who your audience is if you think you just, oh, my gut says my audience is this. No. We are now able to understand our audience right down to the IP address, right down to the tweet, right down to everything. And we give people access to that data. So when I grew up, it was like, I just want to know what I think is, I'm going to do what I think is important. I really don't care about the audience. Because if I think it's important, the audience thinks it's important. Well, I don't think so. It's better to have the data to understand the interests of your audience, where they go, what they do. I have an expression. The data should not rule what you do, but it should inform what you do. And with that data, you can start to understand your audience interests, your audience patterns, and that will help your business. Again, we changed the model. That data informs the type of people we bring on to staff. If we have a lot of people interested in Obamacare, I'm going to find more people to write about Obamacare, experts. If we have more people interested in video games, I'm going to find more people to write about video games because there's an interest in that. If we had a model where we're trying to hire everybody we needed, to a salary position, we couldn't do that. But we can go out and find a contributor who knows that area and bring them on. And that's what we do. So the data runs through the newsroom, and oh, by the way, every staffer and every contributor knows how they're doing within 5 minutes of publishing a post. They know. They know if it's working or it's not working. And I consider that a learning experience. Let me tell you an interesting story about data. When I got to Forbes, we put a little thing called a page view counter on the page. When you go to Forbes now, you'll see if you got 10 page views or 500 page views or 1 million page views. When we first put that live, every staff member, well not every, but most walked into my office and begged me to remove it because they thought it was embarrassing to see how many people were looking at their stories. Because we have a magazine with a circulation of 1 million, so they kind of assumed 1 million people read what they do. Well, that just didn't happen. And I didn't take it down. I said, no, you should know what your audience is interested in, and you can learn from it. Fast forward, 6 months later, our audience is getting bigger. Data was getting too hard for us to process, and the page view counter would, what I used to say, crap out. It would just go to 0 because it couldn't keep up. And guess what happened when it went to 0? No one published content. They didn't publish content because they no longer knew how they were doing. We developed a feedback loop that became very important to people. They wanted to know how they were doing. Well, guess what? If no one's publishing, there are no page views, there are no ads, there is no revenue. So we proceeded to really fix that data processing system really, really fast because we wanted to get people publishing again. So that's how that feedback loop is so important. And again, when we were doing that way back when I was like, oh my God, you're ruining journalism because people should know this stuff. Now it's much more common, except for the fact that we've just gone very deeper, and we use many data tools that I have a tool now that can tell me the time spent on individual posts, how fast the downward scroll was on that post, how fast the upward scroll was on that post. I can tell you everything about your story that you publish on Forbes. It's just fascinating. So we keep drilling down into more minute data. And that's what we use to help run our business. This one, a little complicated, but watch the spinning things. We have a system in our newsroom. We sell advertising. Advertisers want to reach an audience. We have reporters who create content for our audience. We put it in channels. We socialize it through different things. So you can see the middle there, sales, small business, native advertising, goes to tech. We spread it on LinkedIn. We want to get it on a mobile browser, and it's for the United States audience. That's how our newsroom works. What's the advertising that we're selling? Where do we want to sell it? How do we want to distribute it? What device do we know our audience is on to use it? And where is it going in the world? That's called trying to monetize your content with the assets that you have. I wrote this post. I got a lot of page views on this post. People said it was complicated. Some people said it was brilliant. Some people said it sucks. But the point is, we're running a newsroom business now that understands it needs to make money. We need to match up content with advertising. We need to match up advertising and content with social distribution. We need to match it up with the audience on the device that they're going to use, whether it's an app, or whether it's a smartphone, or whether it's a desktop, or whether it's print. And we need to match it up to the region of the world. Advertisers are very specific about what they want. This is a vastly different kind of model than go find a great story and write it and hope for the best. So that's a new newsroom process that we built. And it has helped greatly for our company. Let's see, I'm trying to get to the next slide. There we go. products. This is a new page that was launched. But my main message here is this. Journalism is about stories, great reporting, but they all go into products. And that's why I'm called a chief product officer, which is an unusual title in this business. Magazine is a product. Digital Forbes.com is a product. It's a different product on desktop than it is on mobile. An app is a product. A photo gallery is a product. A page is a product. They're all products that need to fit together in a business for stories to be housed in. We have developed a product mentality at Forbes that never existed. It used to be editors, salespeople, and technologists. Now it's editors, product people, salespeople, and technologists. Most of the people who I have hired over the last 4 or 5 years fit into the product production area, not into the pure content creation area. We produce a lot of content. We need to build bigger and better products all the time. Not once a year, not once every month, but every month, every 6 months, every 3 months. We're constantly building new things for our website or even our magazine, for advertisers who want to reach people. And that's one of the great changes in journalism, is the notion of having a product mentality in addition to a journalistic mentality. And I'll tell you who makes the best product people? People with a journalistic training. Engineers, yes, to a point. Journalists, more, because they have a connection with the audience, they have a connection with writing, they have a connection with reporting, they have a connection with professionals. This is a great area of opportunity for journalists with knowledge to help build the products that are going to drive the revenues of media companies moving forward. Someone asked me yesterday why a journalism degree was important if a forklift operator can make $100,000. Because you can help build the next generation of journalistic products that are going to be needed to get information to people. So what has all this done for us? All this sort of stuff that we're going to ruin things with? Well, the bottom line is digital. That started at started 15 million, and it's now up to 70 million users a month by one count. By another count, it's went from 10 to 45, whatever, it's a lot of people. But what's most interesting to me is print. Because we developed a big social audience digitally, because we developed a big website digitally, it had a very big effect on the readership of our magazine, which has gone from 5 million to 7 million readers, not subscribers, readers, in the last few years. Now, I'm not going to be catty. I don't want to be catty. But our competitors, that print number, each and every one, is down. 5 competitors, all down. It's a great chart. I love that chart. You can go on my page. You can find that chart. Ours is the only one that's gone up. Because we did things to extend our brand and who we are to the digital world. It's had a good effect on our magazine, and that has had a great effect on magazine revenues as well. And it's working. It's worked very well for us. So we built a big digital audience, and we helped our magazine audience as well. I guess that's the future right there. That thing called a smartphone is going to, I've said this many times, it's going to crush every traditional newsroom that doesn't have the proper model or models moving forward. You can get $50,000 for a print ad CPMs, cost per thousand impressions. You can get $25 for a desktop ad, CPM, cost per thousand impressions. Or you can get $2 on a mobile phone. 50% of our audience is on mobile phones right now, and that's getting pretty common. You cannot run a newsroom that got $50,000 for an ad for something that gets $5 for an ad. We can't do it. And it has to change. So part of what we've been doing is understanding that and changing the models. And that's one of the stress points in the industry today that few people just really don't want to address. That the mobile audience is there. Advertisers will not pay the same for a little tiny screen as they do for a big page or a 60-second or 15 or 30-second spot on television. They just won't do it. So we have to adjust our models to fix that. And so that's why I've gone from being, I used to say I used to be an editor way back when, to a product manager trying to figure out how do you create great journalism, some would say a different kind of journalism, in a world where advertising is changing and technology is changing and the audience is changing. How do you do it? And that's what I do in my job today. That's something else you should be aware of called programmatic buying. People don't play golf. Sales guys don't go on golf courses anymore. Drink it up, have a great round, and someone gives them a lot of money for advertising. It doesn't work like that anymore, okay? If it does, it happens frequently, very infrequently. Advertising is bought and sold on computers. And that 4-hour golf round is now done in microseconds through a computer. And it's very, very efficient. And that computer buyer can find a computer seller of ads in microseconds at a very efficient cost. No salespeople, no travel budgets, no golf, no whining and dining, none of that. And it is very, very cheap, and that's why a lot of these ad rates are going down, because it's very efficient. I was in Europe last week, and I went to a store. I won't say the store because they'll give away my interests. I bought something, and I went on the website. I got up this morning. That store is trying to sell me something on Forbes.com. They found me. Now, that's okay with me because obviously I liked what I bought, so I don't mind that they found me. But that's how it's working. They will find you, and they will find you for pennies. And it didn't take a sales guy to do it. It took a computer exchange to do it. That's the world that we live in today. Native advertising, back to that. It's nothing new. That's the Michelin Guide edition, 1900. Michelin wanted to get people in cars, right? They wanted to get people in cars so they could sell tires, right? So they put out a book, How to Get Around, right? People kind of liked it. It was helpful. It was a marketer who did that, an advertiser, a company, not a journalism. So there's nothing new about native advertising, which was called content marketing, which was called custom publishing. There's really nothing new, even though people yelled and screamed about it. What was new was the delivery of it through technology. So now we went from 0 people, marketers on Forbes, to 60 who are publishing content, not Michelin, although I would certainly like Michelin. And they are helping our models, and they're helping us fund our business. So there's nothing new. The only thing that's new about journalism ever is the technology. Everything else really stays the same. It's the technology that drives something. So when you hear about people talk about native advertising, it's 100 years old, okay? It's just brought back in new ways because of technology. The 800-pound gorilla. 10 years ago, those F's would have had G's. It was Google. Now the 800-pound gorilla is Facebook. billion and a half people, it's a lot. And they're now talking about, right now, everybody, remember we started this out, how pandering to social media? So you could find someone on Facebook who would click on a link to go to your story on a website. Well, if you're Facebook, why do you want someone leaving Facebook to go somewhere else? You really don't. You might just keep them on Facebook. So now Facebook, and I lived that life through AOL for 7 years. By the way, 30 million people 15 years ago was the version of 1.5 billion today. But Facebook is now talking about hosting news sites. So in other words, the New York Times and whoever would have their content on Facebook, and that content would be on Facebook, so it would never link to the NewYorkTimes.com or to Forbes.com or the WallStreetJournal.com. And guess who would sell the advertising? Facebook would sell the advertising. They'd share in it. Guess who would own the information and data? Facebook would own that data. That's a very big thing to think about. Does the news business want to start to be even more dependent on Facebook? It's enticing because there are 1.5 billion people on Facebook, but do you lose your relationship with your reader and your audience if you don't understand the advertising and you don't understand the data and who are your audience? And make no mistake, when you have the power of someone like Facebook, and this is not a diss on Facebook, it's just the realities of the world we live in today, they want the data all to themselves. It's their business. And data is critical right now. So that's where we're at. It's not a romantic story. It's a real world story. And I'll end with this. That's fake. That's a colorized version. I really believe there is no better time to be a journalist than today. I believe it's more exciting than ever. There's a bigger audience who you can reach than you could have ever reached. Those guys was the Washington Post. Today, it would be the world, okay? You can reach a bigger audience than ever. You don't necessarily need to have some editor hire you to do what you want to do. You can go on Tumblr, or you can go on Twitter, or you can do whatever and start to publish your own content. You can do it that way. You can find the tools to publish and build your own website. The one thing you need is what those guys had: real deep knowledge into a very specific topic. And if you understand your topic, and if you understand your audience, and if you understand the publishing tools, and if you're passionate about what you're doing, it is the best time to be a journalist. Questions? You're journalists, you better ask some questions.
There's been a lot of controversy in stories published January 25th. Everything from advertising page to the Wall Street Journal, mostly critical stories about Condé Nast's decision to go to continue advertising printed content. Most of the controversy involving people who are working as journalists and the resistance to make the change and the wisdom to make the change. Why doesn't that? Why doesn't this change represent a pollution, corruption of the journalism?
I got to be careful here. I've read those stories. I've heard that. I don't believe, Forbes doesn't believe, that reporters and editors should be doing any work for marketing partners. We don't share that vision of the world or native advertising. Our vision of the world is there are reporters and editors who do editorial, and there are people who work on for marketers and native advertising, and they are separate. So I've read those stories. I suspect that's going on. I don't. It's not my view of the world, and we don't do it. We've had contributors who have said, we'd like to work for marketers and both editorial, and I said, you cannot do that. You need to pick one or the other. And they picked. But you can't do both. So I'm not totally sure that answers your question, but it's not a model that we will ever follow. Come on.
What safeguards do you have in place to protect the value of your brand?
We have a very rigorous vetting process for our contributors. We do background checks. We do interviews with them, with their references. We read their content. Sounds like hiring an employee, doesn't it? We do all that. And we have contracts. And we have contracts with ethics policies, and we have contracts that talk about everything. And oh, by the way, when in their publishing platform, every month they actually have to check the box that they remember that they've promised all this. Okay? Is that perfection? Absolutely not. Neither is journalism perfection, i.e. just the whole business with Rolling Stone over the last few weeks. And when people damage that trust we have because they're under contract, we take the appropriate steps to get rid of them. And we monitor things very carefully, and we've made mistakes. But I will say that any new model, any new thing that you do, there are going to be mistakes. There are going to be mistakes. Just like there have been mistakes over the years at the New York Times and the Washington Post and USA Today. Journalism is not perfect, and our model's not perfect, but it's young, and it's getting better.
You talked about mobile potentially crushing news organizations that don't figure out a strategy to monetize it. What are you thinking about that? What do you think the model might look like?
Well, I don't want to say we're visionary, we're not, but we've reduced the cost of creating content by being able to scale content. We produce 300 to 400 pieces of content a day. And we have an incentive model, as I explained, for our contributors that as traffic goes up, the costs of that content go up significantly less. So, like it or not, in the world we live in today, scaling content, which means a lot of it, requires a model where you can create more content with marginal costs, and that's what our contributor model does. It's not like Bloomberg with 2,000 reporters, or even the New York Times with 1,000. Those are the models that are going to face a challenge as mobile advances. And I'm not saying that we don't have our challenges, because we did this while advertising was up here, and as mobile advertising comes down here, the margins gets less. It's a real complicated. It's not fun, to be very honest with you. It's not fun. That's not the fun part, but it's what we live through.
Thus far, what's been the most monumental or memorable part of your career?
Well, I'm having the most, even though I just said it's not fun, generally speaking, I'm having the most fun than ever. I think there's nothing like creating a startup. When you are, I've had great jobs. Newsweek was great, smartest people I ever worked with. AOL was the scariest place because I didn't know anything, and I learned from the beginning. I really, truly knew nothing. And I'm not sure why they hired me, but they did. But doing a startup when you're out with an idea, and sorry I got into this because I get a little emotional about this, but I had an idea, and I didn't know what to do with it. And there was the idea that we're talking about here. And there was a Thanksgiving Day. This is some advice to you guys. It was Thanksgiving Day, and I was working on this idea, and I got a current issue of Atlantic magazine, and there was a story in it. And the story pretty much, I mean, this is unfair, this is not right. I said, this guy just stole my idea. Well, really, he didn't steal my idea. He just was sort of talking about something that I could see everything I was talking about was in this. And I was very unhappy that Thanksgiving morning. And I was living in Washington, D.C., working for AOL, and I ran down the steps. My now wife had a townhouse, and I ran down the steps, and I won't repeat the language, but it was really hardcore. I said, this TK, you know what a TK is? This TK stole my idea. And my wife said to me, how would you feel if somebody did it before you did it? From that day on, that's all I had been thinking about. And I went out and I raised the money, and it was not easy because you're begging for money, you're going around, and then you get it. And then you get it, and then you have to figure out who you're going to hire. And then after you figure out who you hire, you're going to say, where are we going to work? And then you got to do all the things that you don't do, which is like get cashier's checks to pay for real estate, figure out budgets, figure out Excel spreadsheets. And as I look back, those things were the most exhilarating times that I've ever had, from the running down the staircase to the raising of the money. And I took a chance, and it worked. Now I will say this too. I will never do that again, okay? Ever. I was too old probably at the time to do it, but I did it. But if you have a dream, you need to go for it. You just need to go. What is the worst that can happen? It doesn't work. And you move on. It's no big deal. Just go for it. And I guarantee you, if you go for it, if it works or doesn't work, it's a perfect win-win. I'm never going to tell you I didn't think I was going to do it, but I had an idea. If it wasn't successful, I would win by learning, and that learning would get me somewhere else. It happens to have worked out quite well. So if you have a dream, just go for it. And living the dream is the exhilarating thing, for me anyway. I've never said it like that, so thanks for asking the question.
With the new live streaming features and Snapchat and the live streaming camera coming to Twitter, how do you feel that's going to change the business?
Video is going to change dramatically. There's an expert here, you'll hear from him later, but right now we live in a world, and I'm not a TV expert, so I don't know if this is the case in television, but certainly with digital video, if you don't respond to it in 2 or 3 seconds, it's over. It's over. And a lot of the video created today does not compel you in 2 or 3 seconds to actually get engaged. And you guys probably see all the video in your Facebook streams, and you know what you click on and what you don't click on. But you click on what gets your attention. And it's very specific, because when you see that video, at the moment there's no way really to monetize video on Facebook, but there will be. And an advertiser is only going to pay if there's a click. They're not paying if you're just going through your feed like this. So those first 2 or 3 seconds have to get you to actually engage and click. And I think that's going to start to change the nature of how video is created and produced, and the sequences and the storytelling. And I think that will be the same as social media, because our attention spans are very, very short. So if you're types of people like to clear your throat before you get to anything, it isn't going to work moving forward. You got to get right into it really fast to draw people's attention. It's different than a story. Text. People will kind of meander through text, but they don't want to invest the time if the video isn't catching them right off the bat. That's my opinion. There's a question up there.
In terms of products, new products, is it like, infographics or like lists, we list a bunch of these as they kind of like a newer model. What else would be something that would impress you, or like maybe kind of on the front
Yeah.
line of coming up with new
Yeah.
products?
It's a great question. I pay a lot of attention to mobile apps, and specifically the mobile apps that are aggregators of content versus the single source apps from a publication. Single source apps are not successful. Aggregation apps like Flipboard and Circa, you should pay attention to these. And the one that I actually pay attention to a lot has the awful title of Yahoo Digest. But what these things are doing, it's non-linear storytelling, which is really the future. We as journalists, I'm not one, I don't know what I am, but I used to be, but you as journalists, linear storytelling is wonderful. It does not work on a smartphone device. It's nuggets. It's allowing people to, if you go to Yahoo Digest, you go on the page, it's beautifully done. It's beautiful because there are no ads. Once you put ads in, life is not as beautiful. But it's beautiful, beautiful picture, brings in the first paragraph, brings in some tweets, brings in a photo gallery, brings in Wikipedia, brings it all in. You can kind of get the world 360 degree of that story, surfacey, but really quick, very fast, and that's a smartphone experience. And then if you want to move on deeper from that, you can. But I think the world of linear storytelling, there's going to have to be a level above it that brings that 360 degree view for someone to get in about 15 or 20 seconds. That's what I pay attention to. That requires a whole new way of publishing. That requires a whole new way of injecting content so that you're bringing in a gallery, bringing in this, bringing in that. It's a whole different level of storytelling, and it's going to be very important. And then we have to figure out how you put advertising and all that. So these are significant products that you should pay attention to. There's another one called Smart News, which is a mobile app. And I'm not stressing the app part of it, I'm stressing the mobile part of it, the smartphone part of it, because really tablet usage is really kind of going down. Smartphone usage is definitely on the way up.
One more question.
One more.
Do you pay a lot of attention to things like media or giving the publishing
I pay a lot of attention to Medium. I mean, they're distributed. They're distributed in a different way than Forbes is. They're giving it to a lot of people, but Medium is small right now. But Medium is Jack Dorsey, so you have to pay attention to that. It's beautiful. Again, no ads. I've talked to those guys. They're not about a revenue strategy right now. But Medium is that's another way you can publish, by the way. I should have mentioned that. Medium is a great source of publishing for you. So yes, I do. Thank you very much. It's been fun.